Hey everybody. Um, Earlier today, comic legend Harvey Pekar died. Um, this wasn't too much of a surprise. He was a very old man, but he had a tremendous influence on what I felt comics were, what they could be, and uh, more importantly, a particular point of view on the American way of life. His comic American Splendor, not all of which I have read, has influenced me in very subtle ways. None of which are particularly apparent in any of my work, but I still loved it tremendously. So I'm going to read my favorite American Splendor story called How I Quit Collecting Records and Put Out a Comic Book with the Money I Saved. Story by Harvey Pekar. The original art is done by Robert Crumb. Ever since I was a kid, it seems I collected something. At one time it was comics and then magazines about sports. Then when I was 16, I started collecting jazz records. At first and for a long time, it was a healthy thing to do. I loved jazz and listened to it closely and analytically. For a long time, I collected in an irrational way. I only bought records that I enjoyed listening to and or that had great historical significance. But then for some reason I got obsessive about it. I started buying records I knew I'd seldom if ever listened to just for the collector's value. It got worse and worse. I started getting all these auction lists and spending fantastic amounts of money on how to print LPs. I was spending all my money on records I just filed away without listening to. I had to think twice about buying a hamburger or going to a movie. I hustled pop records that I got in all sorts of ways to people at work to get extra dough. That was a time-consuming drag. I was going blind going over all the auction and sales lists I got because I spent so much time reading them. I bought so many records it was crazy. I was running out of space. One day in the spring of '75, I was going over a bunch of auction lists. There were records on them that I wanted to bid about $600 on within about 6 weeks. Some I wanted real bad, but where was I going to get the bread for them? It was freaking me out. While I was thinking about it, a buddy of mine came over to ask me if he could borrow a couple of rare John Coltrane Airshot LPs to play on his college jazz radio show. Can you spare them for a few hours? I'll take good care of them and return them right away. This guy was a real good guy. He was into yoga and came on sort of like a holy man. But he really wasn't self-righteous. He was a responsible guy too. But I was paranoid about lending out my records. Well, you can use them, but I gotta come down to the studio with you while you do it. So we went down to the station together. While he was on the air, I started to browse through the station's record library. I ran across about a half dozen LPs I didn't have, and eventually planned to get. They were still in print, but they would have cost me around $30 to buy. I knew that a lot of people ripped off records from that station. So I figured, fuck it, what's the difference? And I decided I was going to steal the sides, but I thought I'd be slick about it. It was Sunday. The building was deserted. So what I did, I sneaked the sides out of the studio and stuck them in the bathroom. First, I checked the bathroom door to make sure it wouldn't automatically lock behind me so I could go back for the sides. It was okay. Then I stuck the sides in a box of toilet paper. Then I went back to the studio to bullshit with my buddy. I figured I'd take the Coltrane records when he was through with them and split while he was still on the air. He'd see me walking out of the studio with only the Coltrane records in my hand. So if the other sides were missed, he wouldn't suspect me. I mean, the cat trusted me. I didn't want him to know I was stealing, like he was such a moral dude, you know? He was even against stealing from stores and institutions. So he finishes playing the Coltrane sides, gives them back to me, and I split. Thanks a lot, man. It's okay. Look, I gotta take off now. So then I make it over to the bathroom to get the sides. But the door is locked. I couldn't believe it. I had tested it to make sure it wouldn't lock on me. I yanked on it again and again. It was locked. That blew my mind. I was already wondering where I was going to get the $600, and now I had thrown away another $30 worth of signs because I had devised too elaborate a trap to rip them off. But if I had stuck them in the hall someplace, that'd have been okay. No one was going to come along and see them, but now I had to get cute and stick them in a toilet paper box in the bathroom. I walked back home in a daze. How could I have been so stupid? It was so easy to steal those sides. Now I gotta come up with $30 more to buy them someday. What if they find the size of the toilet paper box? Will they suspect me? My head was all fucked up. I sat down to relax and think about my situation. This record collecting is driving me nuts. It's taking all my time and money. No matter how many records I get, I'm never gonna be satisfied. I gotta get more. I've tried to quit, but I can't. What am I gonna do? This is like being a junkie. I tried to quit a few months ago. I got so disgusted I went back to bed thinking I had it together, but I woke up with the same collector's itch. It's so hard for anybody but another collector to understand why you can't kick the habit. Right now I feel like I want to quit collecting, but tomorrow I'll probably feel different. But surprisingly, the next day I still felt fed up with collecting. Oh, maybe I can give it up. And what happened was that for some reason I was able to give it up. It's funny how your mind sometimes works. One day you can't bring yourself to do something, the next day you can do it. Why it hadn't happened to me before, I don't know. But I'm glad it did, for a couple of major reasons. For one thing, I was free from the pressures of trying to get every jazz I'd ever made and all the time and effort it took up. And for another, I could spend my money on something besides food, rent, and records. See, I've been writing these underground comic stories since like 1972. People liked them a lot, but I was having problems getting them published because the underground comic publishers were in bad shape financially. They were printing very little. All they wanted to handle were sure sellers, stuff like Crumb and Shelton. It really bugged me that I was having such a hassle getting things published. So anyway, I suddenly had all this extra dough I wasn't spending on records. And since I was still hustling LPs at work, I live real simple and cheap, you know? I don't have a car, I don't eat expensive food. Like I might have 2 hot dogs and some potato chips for supper. So I started asking around trying to figure out how much it would cost to publish a comic book. So I found out I could save up enough bread in a year to publish one. So that settled it. I figured, fuck it. I'll print it, and if I lose the money, so what? So I published American Splendor, and I'm really glad I did.